I've never really quite understood why non-whites, Africans, South Americans, Middle Easterners, why do you become Christian? Why do you believe in a religion that was invented by white people for the benefit of white people and to subjugate you? I've always said that the true identity of white people is not Christianity. Their true identity is white supremacy. Christianity is just a veneer, a facade that they use for their own purposes. And this has been proven time and time again. And unfortunately for many, it's quite a shock when you watch them find out for the first time this is how white people actually are.
That you would want the America to be
majority white.
You would want them to be majority white. If you had, and this was what was interesting, if you had a black person who met your criteria standard-wise and character-wise and spiritually, that you would discourage your daughter from marrying this individual.
If we're not in a vacuum, if we're not in isolation, then ordinarily, for every black man who would fit my criteria, currently, right now, let's just be honest, for every black man who would meet my theological criteria, heritage criteria, all those kind of things, moral criteria, behavioral criteria, he's upstanding, for every black man like that, there would be at least 20 white men.
So, but why would you discourage against the black one who meets your
Because
standard?
if both options are viable, there are 20 white men who fit the bill and one black man who fits the bill, then all things being equal, I would prefer for my grandchildren to look like me.
I mean, the look on his face, when he's discovering this for the first time is absolutely priceless. Now, most of you are familiar with No Logic. He's a very popular Christian apologist. And he thought that I'm a Christian, I'm defending Christianity, I'm with David Wood and all these other white people. And here he is sitting down with, I think most of them are pastors, right? All white men at a white table, I'm accepted, I'm in the club. Then to get the shock of his life, these people don't like you. Look, normally I'd feel some sympathy for No Logic in the scenario and predicament that he found himself in. But he's such a foul person. He's so devious, he's so insincere that I actually quite enjoyed that. I'm glad that happened to him. This is one of the defining things that really separates Islam from Christianity and proves the miraculousness of Islam. But I'll get to that point a bit later. This pastor really gave us a true insight into how these people think. I'm glad he's this honest, and I wish more and more of them would be this honest. You respect them more for being honest. They don't beat around the bush. They say exactly how they feel, right? They're unapologetic about it, no matter how much you might despise what they say. He wants America to be white majority. We want black people, brown people. You should be in the minority. You should be weak. You should be maybe even, still this is something they can't say. We wish for the old days when you guys were all enslaved. This is how we truly feel. Now look, that last bit where he says, I want my grandchildren to look like me. That's not really the shocking bit. That's not a big deal. That's just a natural inclination, right? But the fact is that he would discourage his daughter based purely on race. So a person can come to your house, he meets all your criteria, but I'm going to reject you purely based on your race. And this is how I brought up my daughter. That's the really shocking bit. And then, the mentality. So he believes that white people are so superior that this criteria that I've set up, because black people are so inferior, that a very, very small minority are going to meet this criteria. For every 20 white guys that meet this criteria, you're lucky if you get one white guy, one black guy to meet that criteria. Why? Based on what? Because they believe the white race, this is white supremacy, the white race is superior. They're superior culturally, intellectually, right? While black people, brown people, they're just inferior. They have, retard IQ levels. You'd be very, very lucky to pick one out of, I don't know how many, right, that might act like a normal human being. So they believe that when you look at the condition of black people in America, right, on average, black people are usually less affluent than white people. They're not as well educated. They don't come from affluent neighborhoods, right? They usually come from neighborhoods, when you compare black and white neighborhoods, their neighborhoods there's a lot more crime, there's a lot more theft, there's a lot more drugs, a lot more violence, right? There's a lot more poverty, there's a lot more fatherless homes. So what would they attribute this stark difference between black people and white people to? Well, they'll say, it's because black people, they're intellectually inferior. Their IQ levels are less. their culture is inferior to white culture, to the intellectual capacity of white people. That's why they are how they are. You know, they'll never be successful because they're black, because it's inherent in them. So they ignore 400 years of slavery, ignore 400 years of impoverishing these people. They lived in the worst conditions. God knows how many of them you killed. You never allowed them to be educated. You never allowed them to have good jobs, to become affluent. And then even in the 50s and 60s, when slavery was gone and you removed segregation, the black neighborhoods were still the worst. They were still the poorest. They had very little government infrastructure. Very little money was spent on their neighborhoods. And they're 400 years behind. Even though you suddenly gave them their freedom, they're not segregated, and you allow them to mix in society and to go and get educated and to go and get jobs. The racism is systemic. They still can't flourish in these schools because of the racism. They can't. They don't have the same chances of getting a certain job as a white person because of the racism. You introduced drugs into their societies, which created the gang culture. And we know the systemic racism that's in the police departments, where black people, black youth were targeted and put in jail at a much higher rate, higher percentage than white people. This created this poverty. This created this, this gang culture, these neighborhoods of violence and criminal activity, and a whole generation that grew up without fathers because they were all jailed, sometimes for petty actions. So you're the root cause of all the problems that black people have faced in the last 400 years in America, and the reason that their neighborhoods are how they are. So what do? What does this Christian pastor come along and many others like him? You ignore all of that. And you say, no, black people are like this because they're black. They're just inferior to us. That's why they're like that. White people are just superior. And you see them doing this consistently, not just with black people. You've seen this whole, fuss they've kicked up about Somalis, and Somalis are scamming billions and billions of dollars, right? From the NDIS and food stamps and the American taxpayer. And then Trump comes out on national TV in his press conferences. Even in Europe, at the World Economic Forum, he brought up Somalis. He brought up Ilhan Omar, that these are low IQ people. Look at their country, it's so backward. It doesn't have a functioning governance. It's just crime-ruled violence. So they ignore the death and the destruction that they bring about in these countries, in these third world countries, all the interference, the CIA-backed coups, the invasions, occupations, the endless drone attacks, where you've decimated these countries, decimated their economies, created this civil war and strife where there's these endless coups. You ignore all of that and you just come along and say, no, these Somalis, they're backwards. They're low IQ. That's why they are how they are. And now they come into our country and they're telling us about our constitution.
A war that would be good for us is a war where we actually get stuff and would make us rich. Like, a war that would make us rich is to go to war in Venezuela. And a lot of people are criticizing me. They're like, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. They have a lot of oil. We should take it. We're the biggest country ever. We're the biggest and best country ever. They have all this oil and we're playing games. We're going to let this guy say, oh, you don't get our oil. Says who? We will come in and we will kill all of you. Our military will come in and wipe out your regime and we will take your oil and enrich our country.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the same sentiment among all of these guys, right? Venezuela is a Christian country, a Catholic country. Nick Fuentes, this grifter, he supposedly calls himself a Catholic. This is my identity. It's so important to me. I'm still a virgin because I'm a Catholic. So what does Trump do? Trump bombs a Catholic country, kidnaps their leader, kills innocent civilians, Catholics. And what does this white Catholic do? He cheers it on. He has no sympathy. He does not care. This grifter has been completely exposed. He came out, to use Gaza to popularize himself because that was, in the last 2 years, this has been really the biggest issue in the world. So he used that and he presented himself that he's anti-war and anti-killing and he sympathizes with innocent people and so on and so forth. All right? He only used that for his own selfish purposes, for his own benefit, to grow his platform. Right? And now you can see that his grift has been completely exposed. He's just exactly like Trump and all the rest of them.
For the numbers. So here's what they were. The biggest city in the United States then and now is New York City. New York City in 1950 was 90% white. 71 million New Yorkers out of 7.9 million were white. Chicago in 1950 was 86% white. Philadelphia, over 80%. Los Angeles, 94% white. 94% white. That's almost an ethno-state, actually, at that point. Detroit, Michigan, home of Ford, GM, and Chrysler, 84% white. Baltimore, steel and shipping capital of the Mid-Atlantic, 76% white. That was 1950. You know people who were alive in 1950. Maybe you were. Here are the numbers today. Baltimore, 27% white. Detroit, about 10% white, down from 84. Los Angeles, again, 94%, about 37% white now. Philadelphia, 36%. Chicago, less than 30%. And New York City, again, the biggest city in the country, is now around 30% white, down from 90% in 1950.
Well, if we're looking at numbers, before Christopher Columbus arrived in the 1500s, America was 100% brown, Indian. 100%. Now you fast forward 400 or 500 years later, what is it today? I mean, I don't know, do they even make up 0.5% or 1% in America? Can we look at those numbers, Tucker? That's why I say these guys are all the same. Again, Tucker presents himself as a Christian. His Christian identity is so important. He sees the world through Christian values, right? But they just can't get over the issue of demographics, the issue of whiteness, blackness, immigration. These guys are nothing but white supremacists masquerading as Christians. Now, even if the percentage of white people has dropped in these cities, right? But the majority of these people are still Christian. Aren't you a Christian, Tucker? Isn't this the most important thing to you? Right? If the majority of America is still Christian and the majority of people in these cities is still Christian, then who cares what colour they are? And here in Australia, it's no different.
In terms of the playbook element, and again, we don't want to give away, it's like giving away how to build an atomic weapon. We don't want to do that. But essentially, as long as you disavow violence, so the Nazi groups, for instance, I'll focus on the NSN. If they continue the path they are on of saying, look, we don't support violence, they've stripped a lot of their websites and other fora of references to Hitler. The Hitler reference is problematic because everyone knows it's a well-grounded fact that Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust, which saw the evil murder of so many Jewish and other people, but principally Jewish people. So that's a reference to violence. As long as they strip all of that away, I can see a white power or a white supremacy or a white Australia party forming or a group forming, which as long as they stay below that advocacy of violence, they will be, in our free democracy, allowed to establish themselves without falling foul of the prohibited hate group.
Come on, mate. Give it a rest. Fair income, too right. You just gave away the playbook. Now everybody's going to use that cheat code.
Happens routinely. Do you think the Netanyahu government cares about Christians at all?
No, they care about Christian support from the West, but they don't care about the Christians over there. And I can give you an example. On Easter, on Christmas, Christians are not allowed to literally access from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, where you could literally walk, like it's walking distance to go from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. You're not allowed to go there on Easter. I can tell you myself, when I was 18 years old living in Bethlehem, I was arrested by the Israeli military for the crime of trying to go on Palm Sunday to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And this thing happened over and over again. So I have really hard time buying Mr. Netanyahu's claims that he is the protector of Christians in the Holy Land, when on every single policy he's making life miserable for them. And here's the thing, one of the main issues, Matt, that we're dealing with right now as the Christian community there is settlers terrorism. The fact that settlers acquire Christian land, they take it illegally, build their settlements, and when they build their settlements, the implication of that is not only that we can't access these exclusively Jewish communities that are built on our Christian land, but also like what's called the security checkpoints that creates around that settlements make life miserable for the Christians, make tourism impossible, and therefore Christians leave the country. And the numbers are decreasing and decreasing. And there might be a point where in the very near future, the Holy Land will be empty of its Christians. And this is very, very sad to have Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, have no Christians.
Well, isn't that amazing? Over 1,300 years, Christians lived there happily. Right? Under Islamic rule, Muslim rule, their places of worship, they were all protected, their holiest sites, right? They were not driven out, and now suddenly in the last 50, 60 years, we all hear what's happening. And this is, again, this is what really differentiates Islam from Christianity. And this is why I say white people, their true identity is white supremacy. Because you never ever hear them actually caring about what happens to other Christians around the world. They literally do not care. If they're not white, if they're not European, they couldn't care less what happens to you. As we heard Nick Fuentes, right? Actually will come in and bomb you and take your oil. Right? It's amazing. They literally don't care about what happens to other Christians around the world. Unless, Trump were to use it as a diversion when they started speaking about the Christians in Nigeria and how they were being genocided by Muslims, which is all a lie, by the way. Right? That's the only time you hear them kick a fuss purely for the sake of diversion. Right? And we saw that a few months ago, this was a hot topic, but now you can see, as expected, because they don't really care, it was just a diversion, the influencers were pushing it. Now everybody suddenly forgot about what's happening to the Christians in Nigeria. And this is why it doesn't make any sense for those that are not white to actually adopt Christianity as your religion and defend Christianity. It is, as I said, a religion invented by white people for the benefit of white people to enslave everyone else. And this is what they did. Their whole colonial history, the destruction of Africa, the destruction of India, the destruction of the original Indians in America, the Aborigines in Australia, this was all done in the name of Christianity, justified by Christianity. And they still view you in the same exact way today, even though they've gotten rid of the colonialism. The religion that does make sense, that you should accept, that is the truth, is Islam. Because Islam is unique. Islam is not a religion that was invented by the Arabs for the benefit of the Arabs. And I'll get to that as well in a bit more detail. It's the religion from the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, who sent his Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy for mankind. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in his final sermon, there is no difference between a white man and a black man, an Arab and the one that's not an Arab. There's no difference except in your taqwa. And there are so many verses and so many ahadith that continuously emphasize this point. Once you become a Muslim, your identity is Islam. Your background, your culture, that is all secondary. The basis of your identity, the way you view the world, the way you view other people, is through the lens of Islam. And according to Islam, unlike white supremacists, we don't believe there's any inherent difference between people of different race. They're all human beings. Allah has created you in different shapes and different colors, and you developed your different cultures, right? But in terms of your intellectual capacity, in terms of your capability, right, you are all the same. And a white person and a black person, they can both be intelligent. They can both benefit mankind. And the problems that we see in most third world countries today are not because these countries are inherently inferior, right? It's because of the death and destruction that has been brought down upon them by colonial countries. That's why they're in the condition that they're in. Not only did they bring about death and destruction, not only did they bring about colonialism, even when they ended colonialism, they still won't leave these countries alone. Just leave them alone. Stop interfering, stop your coups, stop your drone attacks, stop your invasions and occupations, stop your sanctions. Then give them a chance, then see if they can fix their problems or not. And again, this is where Islam shines. This is the superiority of Islam under true Islamic societies, true Islamic governance. Not what we see today, these secular nation states. They have nothing to do with Islam. But in the past, when Islamic societies existed that ruled based upon Islamic principles, even though originally Islam came to the Arabs and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was an Arab, after the initial conquest and Islam started to spread, if Islam was based upon the Arabs, the superiority of the Arabs, if it's based upon race and Arab supremacy, then it would have only been the Arabs that ever stayed in power. It would have only been the Arabs that had ever flourished. And every land that was opened by the Arabs, they should have been subjugated. They should have been ethnically cleansed. But the exact opposite occurred. Every time the Muslims opened the land, that land became just as prosperous as the Muslim lands. The people there flourished just as much as the Muslim lands. Education, economy, it all flourished just as much as the original Arab lands. In fact, if you look at the 1,300 year of Islamic history, other than the initial early phase, right, the Arabs really, by and large, were insignificant. The role that they played was insignificant when you look at 1,300 years of Islamic history. The lands that the Muslims did open, those lands usually, they became the leaders. The people that became Muslim from these different cultures and these different races, they flourished. They rose to the top. They became the rulers. Syria, Damascus became the capital of the Muslim world. Baghdad, Al-Kufa, they became, the stronghold of Islam. Egypt became a stronghold of Islam. Spain became a stronghold of Islam. Spain was opened by the North Africans. They took Islam and they flourished with Islam. The Uthmanis came along again. They became the stronghold of Islam. When you look at the majority of scientists and thinkers and inventors in Islamic history, and most importantly, Islamic scholars, theologians, experts in grammar, in Arabic, in poetry, the majority of them were not Arab. The Muslims were not worried. The early Muslims, the Arabs, were not worried. Unlike Tucker Carlson, he was looking at the demographics. How the city's changing, who's more dominant, who's in power, are the Arabs a minority or are they a majority, right? Islam doesn't care about that. Islam is not for any one race. Once you adopt Islam, that becomes part of your identity, right? Then me as a Muslim, if it's black Muslims flourishing, if it's Egyptian Muslims flourishing, if they've become the demographic, they've replaced the Arabs, and I don't care. It's meaningless. Why? Because our identity is Islam. We are Muslims. As I've said many times, that we can all clearly see now, I've been speaking about this for a few years, those that follow my channel closely, that we see this shift happening in these Western countries, right? And this is the shift now. It's clear as day. It's happening a lot quicker than even I imagined, right? This is the direction that they're heading in. And so more and more, you're going to find yourself that if you're not white, you're going to be marginalized. You're going to be targeted. You're not going to be liked. So now more than ever, you have to appreciate and understand that Islam is your only savior. It's only Islam that's going to accept you. It's only Muslims that's going to accept you. White people are never going to accept you. It doesn't matter how Christian you think you are. It doesn't matter how much you defend them and stand up against Muslims and say all of these hateful things and lies against Islam and Muslims as no logic found out. You're just not going to be accepted. I hope inshallah this video has been beneficial. If you found it beneficial, please leave a like, please leave a comment. Please help support the channel by subscribing.